Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a little bit of a different knife, okay? And I'm going to tell you this up front. This is going to be a different video. This is the CRKT Snaplock. It's a Van Hoy design, sort of has that steampunk look to it. It's kind of an interesting knife, almost a bit of a novelty, okay? So this is going to be a different review. I'm not going to look at this as if I'm kind of considering it as my primary EDC or anything like that. And I would even argue that CRKT isn't selling it as that. All right, I think if you ask someone who worked for CRKT, would you recommend this as my, a daily carry knife? They'd be like, no, that's not really what it's meant for. Okay, so let's kind of keep that in the back of our minds, call this what it is, and that is a cool design that's kind of a conversation piece. It's almost like a coffee table book that you keep in your pocket. It's something that people are going to want to hold and look at and kind of become a little bit interested in and maybe have you share with them about a little bit, but it's not going to be, your primary folder that you're going to use for most EDC tasks. It's certainly not going to be any kind of hard use knife or bushcrafting or any of those type of things, okay? This is a light duty, maybe gentleman's novelty cutting tool that you're going to bring out and maybe open some mail with from time to time, or cut a string, or maybe you could bring this out and cut something when, let's say you're carrying something big and scary that day, like you're carrying your Cold Steel 4 Max, and so you carry this as sort of a secondary knife because it's kind of cool, okay? Now there is one other function to this knife, and I'm going to talk about it when we get to the lock, because I think this could be an interesting tool for sharing the knife hobby, okay? And I'll talk about that a little more in a second. So for now though, let's quickly go over size and weight, and that is 6 1/4 inches overall, 2 5/8 inches on the total blade length. That's measured to here, to this little lip, so you can sort of see it's not a perfectly easy knife to measure because this kind of extends out to here and the back is higher than that, but essentially 2 5/8 and then 2 1/2 inches if you just measure the cutting edge is what you got there. On the handle you have 3 3/16. Okay, so that's, in terms of how much actual usable handle you have. And when you close the knife, you can see how this extends past, so you end up with 4 inches, 4 1/4 inches when it's closed. Now, not too heavy. You can see there's not much to this knife in the first place, and it's not overly heavy. This is only 2 1/2 ounces. So when I gave you my intended purpose for this as sort of a secondary knife or a novelty knife or a conversation starting type of thing, that 2.5 ounces kind of makes it possible for this to fit into that category, because it's not, it's not so heavy that you're going to be weighed down by carrying something extra. All right, so let's go ahead and work through some of the features here. The blade is 420 J2, blasted Wharncliffe design. It does have a hollow grind and a bit of a swedge here on top. Now this is a blade, again, this is not going to hold an edge like crazy, okay? 420 is a pretty budget, pretty soft steel. And you know what, this is where, the knife reviewer is supposed to say, I wish they had better steel on this knife because it would make it, well, the reality is, okay, better steel is not helping this knife. Okay, this is not meant to be the knife that you do all your cutting chores with, okay? It's just not. So the 420 J2 is fine because this is something you're gonna open the odd package with, you're gonna do some light duty tasks, and if you need to sharpen it once in a while, that's, one, you're not going to need to sharpen it that often anyway because you're not going to be using it a ton. And if you do need to sharpen it, it's going to take that edge back pretty quickly and easily. All right, so that's my take on this blade. Again, it's fine for what it's intended for. I guess the only thing I would say is my grip kind of tends toward wanting to come out on top of this blade, and it could benefit from having a little more width up here, so I could kind of get a little more comfort for my thumb there. All right, otherwise though, the blade is fine, as I say, for what this knife is. Now let's talk about the interesting thing about this knife, and that is the lock and deployment. This is a real novelty, okay? This is something that not a lot of people will have seen, and it's kind of ingenious the way this works. So essentially you have a little cam here, and when you push down, it spreads open the arms of the handle there, releasing the knife, okay? So let me show you a couple of times there. Let me just do it two-handed. Okay, so see how when I push down on this, the cam just extends, stretches out these arms, freeing the knife, so that it can flip around, and then they pop back into place. And the same thing in reverse to close the knife, and try not to cut yourself. There you go. So pretty interesting in its operation. And one thing I will say, I was really impressed. I thought for sure when I saw this, and even when I've opened it and closed it a few times, I was like, there's definitely going to be some blade play here, up and down, side to side, something. But there isn't, which is kind of surprising to me. And rather appreciated. So at least, well, they've, you know, this is not, as I say, this is not a knife that I would recommend for a lot of things, but the tolerances are at least close enough that it's not all loosey-goosey. And so even though, you know, I don't think they're aiming at the EDC crowd too much, or like the tactical crowd, they at least paid enough attention to tolerances to get us something that has no blade play, which I do appreciate. Nice little wheel here is fairly comfortable. I will say in opening the knife, it's nice because you can just push directly down. You got a big easy surface to get a hold of there. Look how much space on those sort of textured wheels. So I can push that down with my thumb really comfortably. Closing the knife is not as easy. So you've got this stud that sticks out to the side, and you get your finger on one of them. The edges are a little rough, so it becomes a tad bit uncomfortable. Not the end of the world, but just a little rough. Okay, now this is what I want to talk about with you guys just for a second. Because of the way this knife operates, this knife I think fits into a very unique role. I think this is the kind of knife that you could use to really, what would you say? To acclimatize someone who's not into knives and kind of get them more comfortable and maybe even get them more interested. I could see giving this as a gift to just about anyone. You know, I don't care, boy, girl, young, old, anyone's going to see this and be like, dude, that is really cool. And so, you know, and I think they're even going to carry it because of that cool factor, because of that fidget factor. I think this is a knife that can appeal to a lot of people who are not into knives. All right. Now you're probably going to have to warn them that they shouldn't, this blade is not going to hold an edge really well. And so don't depend on it as their primary cutting tool. They may figure that out on their own. As soon as you try to grip this knife, we'll talk about ergonomics in a second. But yeah, when you try to grip this knife, you right away learn you're not doing a whole lot, okay? But that fidgety opening mechanism is really ingenious. And I think anyone who, you know, is mechanically inclined at all is going to be like, hey, this is really, really neat, okay? Neat is not a description I would normally use for a knife, but this one definitely is, okay? And I think that's kind of what you have to look at it as. It's just a neat little cool thing that, you know, no, you're not going to fend off ninja attackers with it. You're not going to carve a spoon that you can, you know, eat your freshly caught whatever with out in the bush. It's not going to be for anything like that. It's just going to be, you know, kind of a conversation piece you throw in your pocket. Maybe you use it if there's a lot of sheeple around and you don't want to make them uncomfortable. And I think another use for it, a supplemental use, would be even convincing some of those sheeple that maybe knives are not all that scary. Okay. And so I think, you know, that's where this knife kind of really finds its place as some interesting sort of thing for mechanically inclined people to kind of geek out over a little bit. The handle is this interesting, you know, stainless steel U-shaped handle, and it becomes part of the locking mechanism, right? It's the tension that the handle creates that holds the blade in place and allows the camming lock to work. Okay, or the snap lock, to use CRKT's name, to work. And that again is a pretty neat feature. It does minimalize the design an awful lot, and I do like when knives are able to do that. All right, so what have I got for comparison? Well, not a heck of a lot, guys. I'll throw in this cold steel because it's kind of similar in size, much more useful, by the way. Here's a pair of 2. All right, I don't have a lot of small knives, so I'm not going to give you a lot of comparisons, but at least that kind of gives you an idea of where it's landing in terms of size. Let's get these guys out of the way and kind of wrap this up. So what do I think of this knife? Honestly, I think it's pretty stinking cool. All right, would I recommend this to you if you're, in the market for a hard use tactical blade? No, of course not. Would I recommend it if you're into a bushcrafting knife? No, definitely not. What about a light duty EDC? Still probably no. Okay. But is it a pretty interesting cutting tool that you can share with your friends, and it's kind of a neat thing to carry around in your pocket? Absolutely. I've used this as a money clip before. It works really nicely for that because it's pretty small. Slide your money there under the pocket clip and carry it around. I think it works great for that kind of a role. And again, for when people ask me, hey, what knife are you carrying today? Well, I may have an XM18 in my pocket. Because people know I'm into knives, so they ask me that. But I'm not going to show them that if I've got this. I'll hand them this, and they are like blown away. Meanwhile, my AD15, which is much more impressive to me, they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, I guess. Maybe it's a little too big. Where this, they're like, whoa, that is so awesome. I can't believe this is a thing, and they play with it and fool around with it. And so that's where I think this knife kind of fits. All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And yeah, before you start hating on this knife, I think the key is to kind of know or kind of put it in its place first, and then build your expectations based on what this knife is kind of aimed at, because I don't think it's really aimed to compete with something like this. All right. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.